The Neo-Assyrian Empire, known as Mat Assur in Akkadian, was one of the ancient world's most powerful military forces, but it wasn't just known for its strength. It was built on a system of terror. Between the 9th and 7th centuries BCE, Assyrian kings developed a new kind of warfare, where victory wasn't complete until every survivor understood the price of resisting their rule. Their method was ruthless and calculated. After a successful siege, the Assyrians made sure to send a clear message, not just to the defeated, but to everyone watching. Cities that resisted were turned into public stages for punishment. The bodies of the fallen were put on display, hung from poles, impaled on stakes, or left to rot in the streets. Prisoners were paraded through the ruins, shackled and humiliated. These acts were not just random cruelty, but part of a carefully planned strategy, deeply rooted in Assyrian royal policy. Inscriptions from the reign of Ashurnasirpal II, 883 to 859 BCE, reveal the chilling nature of their methods. One inscription states that thousands of enemies were killed and many were mutilated. Hands, ears, noses were severed, and some were even blinded. However, the most feared form of punishment was flaying or skinning, which was done to both the living and the dead. The skin was then nailed to walls as a warning. This gruesome act wasn't carried out by regular soldiers, but by specialized executioners trained for this very purpose. Reliefs from the palace of Sennacherib at Nineveh show executioners performing these acts with chilling precision. These executions were usually carried out in public places like city squares or outside the gates. Sometimes local rulers or nobles had to witness the brutal execution of their own relatives before they were blinded and sent away in chains. Assyrian cities were even designed with spaces dedicated to such public spectacles, reinforcing their power through ritualized violence. This use of terror wasn't spontaneous. It was institutional. The cruelty of Assyrian campaigns was documented in stone, recorded in archives, and carried out by trained agents of the state. Terror became the currency of their empire, and they used it with cold efficiency. One of the most notorious punishments was impalement, a public and horrifying act designed to serve as a powerful symbol. During the 8th and 7th centuries BCE, impalement became the Assyrians' signature execution method. It was not simply a way to kill. It was a message, a warning to others. The bodies of their enemies were impaled on tall wooden stakes outside their own cities, left to decay as a grim reminder of what would happen to anyone who dared to resist. The Assyrians believed the public display of these executions extended the punishment beyond just the individual victim. It aimed to control the minds of the living. Executioners were trained not just in killing, but in sending a psychological message. The placement of the stakes, the height, and the angle of the bodies all mattered. Lines of impaled corpses surrounding a city were meant to deliver an undeniable lesson. Rebellion would not be tolerated. These executions were both a legal punishment and a form of political messaging. After a siege, military scribes would record who had been impaled and why, inscribing their names and crimes on nearby tablets or walls. The punishment wasn't carried out in secret. It was a public spectacle meant to break morale and ensure future obedience. Assyrian impalement wasn't just about punishment. It was a calculated tool for political control. The Assyrian Empire also had a notorious method for controlling its subjects through mass deportations. Under kings like Tiglath-Pileser III, Sargon II, and Esarhaddon, the Assyrians implemented one of the most systematic population control policies in history, uprooting entire communities. Unlike the random displacement caused by war, these deportations were a carefully planned strategy designed to weaken potential resistance by scattering populations and breaking their connection to their homeland. It wasn't about building loyalty. It was about destroying any chance of rebellion at its core. When cities or regions rebelled, the Assyrians crushed them quickly and then shattered their social structures. Entire communities, families, workers, farmers, and nobles were forcibly moved from their homes and marched hundreds of miles to new locations within the empire. These deportations were carefully recorded in royal inscriptions and on clay tablets kept in imperial archives. After conquering Samaria in 722 BCE, King Sargon II proudly recorded, I counted 27,290 people. I carried them off to Syria. The deportees weren't killed. Their lives were spared not out of mercy, but for practical reasons. They were relocated to distant, often hostile regions recently conquered by the Assyrians, where they served two key purposes: developing agriculture and infrastructure for the empire, and diluting the local population to prevent future rebellions. The whole process was tightly controlled by executioners and soldiers. Anyone who resisted was punished severely, sometimes by death or public humiliation. Families were often split apart, religious sites were destroyed, and native languages were suppressed. The forced march, often across barren landscapes, was designed to be both physically and psychologically painful. Later historical accounts, including those from the Babylonian historian Berossus, reflect on the lasting effects of these deportations. Entire populations were uprooted, resettled among strangers, and stripped of their former loyalties. While Assyrian royal records boast about the success of these resettlement policies, the human cost was clear. Mass deportation wasn't just about displacement. It was a method of survival through scattering people and dismantling their societies, forcing them to become tools of the empire. Burning cities, scorched earth warfare. What happens when victory is no longer enough and destruction becomes a goal? For the Assyrians, especially under rulers like Ashurnasirpal II, Sennacherib, and Ashurbanipal, conquest didn't just end with military victory. It ended with complete annihilation. Cities that resisted were not merely captured. They were destroyed, often by fire, in what we now recognize as one of the earliest forms of scorched earth warfare. The Assyrians didn't just punish leaders. They punished entire landscapes. Cities were burned to the ground. Temples were looted, granaries destroyed, and people were either scattered or killed. This destruction wasn't random. It was a calculated act meant to cripple any future resistance while instilling a lasting fear throughout the region. Ashurnasirpal II described one such campaign: "I stormed the city. I destroyed, devastated, and burned it with fire. The corpses of their warriors I piled up, their men and women I burned." These acts of destruction weren't just recorded. They were celebrated. Assyrian palace reliefs from Nineveh and Nimrud show scenes of burning cities, with flames rising above city walls while Assyrian troops marched triumphantly below. These images were not warnings. They were trophies, displayed to show the might of the empire. One of the most infamous examples came in 701 BCE during Sennacherib's campaign against the kingdom of Judah. While Jerusalem was spared after a siege, cities like Lachish were completely destroyed. Archaeological evidence confirms that the entire city of Lachish was burned, its gates and shrines desecrated, and its defenders overwhelmed in a brutal assault. The aftermath was just as grim. If any survivors remained, they were left in the ruins with no food, no water, and no leadership. Temples and sacred objects were looted and sent to Assur or Nineveh as symbols of Assyrian dominance. As Ashurbanipal proudly stated, "I carried off the gods of Elam, their treasures and people. I burned their cities. I turned them into ruined mounds." The Assyrians were masters of using fire as a political tool. It wasn't just about defeating cities. It was about erasing them from existence. The message was clear. Rebellion wouldn't just fail. It would be wiped from history altogether. The Assyrian Empire's legacy is marked not only by its stone reliefs and ruined cities, but by its mastery of fear as a tool of control. Through terror, forced exile, and fire destruction of entire civilizations, they reshaped the ancient world and showed how unchecked power can lead to cruel domination. Can we still learn from the dark lessons of Assyria about the dangers of power without limits? Let us know what you think. As Ashurnasirpal II recorded, "In the midst of the mighty mountains, I slaughtered them. With their blood, I dyed the mountains red like wool." The Assyrian Empire's rise and dominance left a mark on history that still resonates today, largely due to methods of control they perfected, methods grounded in terror, cruelty, and the strategic manipulation of fear. From mass deportations that shattered entire communities to the brutal spectacle of public executions and city burnings, the Assyrians showed the world the lengths a regime might go to ensure obedience. Their brutal practices were not the result of random violence, but carefully orchestrated campaigns aimed at maintaining power through psychological and physical destruction. The calculated terror employed by the Assyrians left a deep and lasting legacy. Cities and regions that defied them were not just defeated, they were erased, their people scattered, and their landscapes destroyed. These acts of domination were designed not only to punish, but to break the spirit of those who witnessed them. The Assyrians understood the power of fear and used it as a weapon as effective as any sword or spear. The fear of defiance, instilled through public torture, mass deportation, and scorched earth warfare, became a tool as important as military might in maintaining their empire. However, the Assyrian Empire's approach to power serves as a chilling reminder of what can happen when authority goes unchecked. Their story offers crucial lessons about the dangers of ruling through fear and the destructive effect of oppression. It highlights the fine line between governance and tyranny, showing how rulers can justify cruelty in the name of control. While the Assyrians may have achieved temporary victories through terror, their empire eventually crumbled, unable to sustain itself in the face of its own brutality. In examining the Assyrian Empire, we are reminded of the importance of power being tempered by justice, compassion, and respect for humanity. The Assyrians' legacy challenges us to reflect on our own leadership models and the consequences of power that seeks to dominate rather than serve. The shadow of Assyria still looms in history, urging us to recognize and reject the perils of unchecked authoritarian rule.